Welcome to the podcast From the Alps to the Rockies. It's part of the celebration of 75 years of diplomatic relations between Switzerland and Canada. The Swiss Embassy in Ottawa and the Consulate General in Montreal and Vancouver are pleased to offer you a series of podcasts which will feature speakers from Switzerland and Canada. We will discuss various aspects of collaboration from the Swiss Alps to the Canadian Rockies.
Hello and welcome to our podcast From the Swiss Alps to the Canadian Rockies. I'm Sarah Bagdasarians from the Consulate General of Switzerland in Montreal, and today I'm pleased to be interviewing our compatriot Thomas Guignard, librarian, photographer, who's presenting until November 26, 2020, a photography at the Goethe Media Space located in the Goethe Institut in Toronto. So hello and welcome, Thomas.
Hi.
Could you please present yourself to our audience, your biography, your professional cursus?
Yes, my name is Thomas. I live in Quebec City now, but I grew up in Switzerland. I grew up in the Swiss Jura, so just north of Lausanne and next to the French border. I grew up in Switzerland, but I was born in Canada. So my family emigrated to Canada. I was born there, but then they had to go back for family reasons. So I grew up in Switzerland, but had this connection to Canada that was in the background kind of for the first part of my life. I did studies in engineering in Zurich and in Lausanne, but I quickly found out that it wasn't really for me. I was interested in more like the connection between science and society. So like kind of how to explain science to anyone. But I was still looking for something for myself, and when I saw a posting go by at the library of the EPFL, the Polytechnic Institute in Lausanne, but they were looking for science librarians, and I was like, okay, why don't I try that while I figure out what to do with my life? And found out that actually there's quite a lot of things to do with in a library. And 10 years after, I was still there and finding it interesting. So that's what happened with me. And then that connection to Canada came to life again, because in about 8 years ago, my wife was just finishing her PhD, and she got the opportunity to go to a postdoc in Toronto. She always wanted to go there to work with people there in her specialty, and so we had this opportunity. So we decided to move to Toronto and kind of bring the two projects together this way. And of course, as very often is the case, it was supposed to be a short-term thing, about 2 years, and there we are here 8 years later, still in Canada, and actually we since have moved to Quebec City, where my wife found a new position here. So that's where we are now.
So now in Quebec, before in Toronto, this is maybe why you're exhibiting a photography at the Goethe Media Space. How did you come from library to photography, or librarian to photography? But you're still a librarian, aren't you?
Yes. I'm still very much a librarian. I'm not a photographer in terms like I'm not a professional. Like let's make it clear. I'm just an amateur photographer. I did start. I always had been playing with the camera, like ever since I was a teenager. I had a small analog camera, but I really got back into it while I was finishing my PhD. As someone that was in the same lab as me was very much into photography, and he explained he had a reflex an SLR, so like it's one of the more complex cameras, and he explained to me what he could do with it, and got me interested into into photography again. So I picked up this this hobby at the time because I needed, I think, a way to express my creativity and go out of a very academic pursuit and do something more artistic. And not only I was able to do that thanks to photography, but I also met a lot of very interesting people. There is a photo sharing website called Flickr that at the time was very much encouraging local meetups, local group of people to meet and discuss photography. And there was such a group in Lausanne at the time. And I not only learned a lot about the technique through these people, but I made a lot of friends that are still friends today. So that's my introduction to photography.
And how did you choose your subjects?
So that also was a bit of a like a few things colliding in my life. So back then, I was working at the library of EPFL, again, the Swiss Polytechnic School in Lausanne. We were working on the project of the Rolex Learning Center, which is a new building that, well, actually, it opened 10 years ago now. It opened in 2010, but we were working towards this project while the architects were working to build this new building. The library team was busy kind of rethinking how the library would be organized inside this new building, because it's a very weird, very unique type of building. It's like a big piece of Swiss cheese it has low holes and it's kind of undulating. So the interior space it's one big space with no barriers in it. So just the barriers are created by the undulation of the building and of the floor. So we needed, it was kind of a blank slate for us to kind of rethink the library. And we were looking for inspiration. So we started visiting a few other libraries in Europe that had recently opened, and were looking for ideas, and started documenting what I was saying with my camera, and quickly found out that I was even more interested in picturing the architecture of the place and focusing on the architecture than necessarily on the details that I was first documenting.
So your exhibit is documenting a library in Berlin. Could you tell us about that? Yes,
so it's the library of the Humboldt University in Berlin. It's named after the brothers Grimm that wrote the fairy tales. And it's actually a building by a Swiss architect named Max Dudler. And I think it's from 2008. I should have researched that before, but yeah, I think it's a fairly recent building. So I visited it shortly after it opened. It's quite an interesting place because the space where the library was built is quite narrow. It's right next to a train station, so the architect didn't have a lot of room to build a library there. But he was able to still take advantage of the location and make a kind of a big statement space by creating this very narrow and very high reading space, reading room in which there are kind of terraces, that. It's hard to explain. You have to look at the picture to understand what I'm trying to say here. But in this very narrow space, he nevertheless was able to give it a sense of grandeur. And I was immediately drawn by this space. So I tried to capture it with a wide-angle lens to try to compensate the fact that it's a very narrow space and give it a bit more breadth.
So you use the wide-angle lens. Do you always use that kind of lens, or on the technical side, how do you choose your way of photography?
Yes. So wide angle is I use the wide angle very often because it allows me to capture large spaces in camera. It's usually what you will end up using if you are doing especially architectural photography and interior spaces. You would try to be as wide as possible. You don't want to go too wide because otherwise you start having weird perspective shifts. So I tend to often use wide angle, but not always. Depends on what I want to a picture of, and also it would depend on what I have on me. So sometimes I just go with a small camera and I have a fixed lens. That's kind of an all-rounder, and I just happen to go and visit the library with this camera, and I don't have my wide-angle lens, so I will do what I can with this lens.
And how do you approach the libraries that you photography? Would you have to ask for permission to do your shot, or how do you go about it?
Yeah, so most of the time I do ask in advance. So I was just saying about just walking through the city with my camera. So in these cases, like there are some kind of chance encounters where I find a space and oh, why I would like to take a picture. And then usually I try to ask at the desk, but this is a bit complicated because people at the desk don't know how to react, and I don't want to create complications for them. So what I usually do is I ask in advance, and very often people are like the libraries are very happy to welcome me. I usually offer to share my pictures with them, so they can have them for their own usage. And yeah, they're usually very accommodating. In some cases, they will ask, but usually they ask that I don't take close-ups of people's of patrons, which I totally understand because I'm not here to take pictures of people, and I don't want to invade their privacy. I'm more interested in the space. But in some cases, they ask me to come when there's no one there. So it can be after hours or even before hours. So when the library is empty. So I did that a couple of times. I came when the library was empty, so that the privacy of the readers could be warranted.
Fantastic. And the exhibit at the Goethe Institute is one photography that is actually blown up for an immersive experience. Nowadays, it can be visited on invitations that you can obtain by contacting the Goethe Institute through their website. It's done by a group of 8 people. And how did you come up with that photography for the space at the Goethe Institute?
Yes. So the Goethe Institute approached me a couple of months. Actually, it was last year. They were interested in. They had seen my work online, and they were interested in displaying a picture of a library because this year in 2020, Canada is the invited country at the Frankfurt Book Fair. So the Goethe Institute was looking for a way to kind of celebrate this link between Canada and Germany through books. So so they were looking to display one of my pictures. They have a little display space that they usually have an art piece over there. And when we visited this space together, with the person from the Goethe Institute, we realized that the sides of the wall that was that they use for this little display kind of reminded me of the walls of that space at Humboldt University. So we tried a few. We did a few photography montage with images to see what would fit best there, but we found that putting the Homeworld Library there fits very well. It's kind of like what we would call the trompe-l'œil in French. So it's like it looks like there's like a window between the Goethe Media Space and this library in Germany. Like kind of through this wall you can look towards the space. So we found it to be quite fitting because we wanted this link between Germany and Canada. So that's how we came up with this idea.
Fantastic. It looks very impressive to be in a space where you're surrounded by architecture, actually. And I've heard that you are going to animate their Instagram site in November every Tuesday, and that you're going to show a detail of the photograph. And how are you going to go about it?
Yes, so this is replacing. At first I was supposed to do a little conference, meeting in person at the space there, but obviously this year this is not possible. So instead, Goethe suggested that I take over their Instagram account for a few weeks, and what I will do is I will post 4 close-ups of my picture, and then use those to as kind of illustrations to ask questions about what might have changed with COVID with regards to libraries, because libraries are, yes, they are a place for books, but more than that, they're a place for people to come together and work together and exchange and meet. All things that are no longer possible or very different now. So we want to take this opportunity to kind of think back about the things that have changed through COVID and what could be long-lasting changes. Like it's likely that we won't go back to exactly the way it was before. So what would it mean for places like libraries that are by definition a place of gathering? So in a sense, for me, it's kind of a way to go around having to answer the question. I don't have to be smart and answer this question. I can just use my image as a conversation starter.
So you're going to meet people through their Instagram. It's Goethe Institut _Toronto every Tuesday in November. When you went to visit all those libraries in Europe, I suppose, or around the world, you certainly met many people. Did you have funny, interesting encounters?
Yes, so to go back to your earlier question about contacting libraries before I visit, it has allowed me to meet very interesting people indeed. Yes, so I actually like when I'm able to go there and talk with someone who works at the library, because they can exchange about what's particularly interesting about that place. Depending on who I'm speaking with at the library, sometimes they understand my approach and are very welcoming, and sometimes they don't, and the welcome can be quite different and sometimes unexpected. So last summer I was in Paris, and the same day I visited 2 libraries, two very beautiful libraries. One was the Bibliothèque du Sénat and the other Bibliothèque de l'Hôtel de Ville. And so for the Bibliothèque du Sénat, I wanted to visit this place because I had seen pictures. It looked beautiful. I didn't realize that this was the actual Senate, so where the French politicians actually meet and work. So that tells you how well prepared I am when I visit. So I wasn't expecting it at all. So I came in here. They told me, okay, come at this time and meet with a person there. I was escorted then throughout the Senate to this beautiful library. I was walking through these corridors with a lot of pomp, like it's a hallowed space where the corridors of power, in a sense. And I was just with my T-shirt and my camera, so I felt very out of place in this space. And then the librarians there were not quite sure what I wanted, so it was a bit weird. But I, again, very happy that they welcomed me and got to take a picture. But the same day I went to this other library, Hôtel de Ville, where the head librarian had known that I was coming and really wanted to meet with me. So I was escorted. Again, I was brought to his office, like up in a small narrow staircase in this very old building. And then this person was waiting for me, quite interested in my project and wanted to talk to me about what I was doing and why did I choose this library. And he had a little surprise for me. Because it's the Bibliothèque de l'Hôtel de Ville, so it had started as a library for the people working at City Hall in Paris, so people working on urban issues. So they had a book about the organization of the city of Toronto from the 19th century that he had pulled from the collections to surprise me, and that's how we started our conversation. So.
Fantastic. To my mind, which is your favorite library in Switzerland?
Oh, the favorite library in Switzerland, that's a trick question. I don't know which one is my favorite in Switzerland. I have many.
Or your top 5 or top 3, as you wish.
It depends because some libraries I'm interested in because of their architecture, others because of the history I have, like because this is the place where I grew up, or so a few that come to mind. Some are in Zurich. I did my studies in Zurich, so one room is one of my favorite spaces. It's at the Zentralbibliothek, so Central Library in Zurich. The music collection is actually in the choir of the Predigerkirche. So the library is in downtown Zurich in Niederdorf, and right next to this church. So the church is still a church, still an active church, but the choir, so the back end of the church is no longer a church. It's part of the library now. So you have to know that this place exists. It's not immediately evident that there is a space there. So you have to find a little door and go up the stairs, and then you are in this previous church that's now been converted into a Musikabteilung, and it's just a magical space. So that's I would say this one is definitely in my top 10. I also very much like the law library in Zurich, the law library of the University of Zurich, which was built by Santiago Calatrava. It's one of my favorite architects. It's quite a different space from the church I was talking about. But yeah, I mean, Rolex Learning Center is in Lausanne. The one I was talking about earlier is also quite a unique space. But I also like the BCU, Bibliothèque Cantonale Universitaire in Lausanne, especially the Ripon place, a place that I visited a lot.
So there are quite many interesting spaces
yes.
for everybody's taste or mood, depending on when one is going. And what about, have you had time to visit some libraries here in Quebec since you moved a few months back?
Yes, the interesting thing is during COVID, the Toronto libraries were closed and were still closed when I moved here. But actually, the Quebec ones had reopened when I so I was still able to visit them. Although as of Wednesday this week, they're going to close again, unfortunately. So I was able to visit a few libraries here, and I found out that in Quebec, there's quite a lot of libraries that are installed in former churches. So to go back to the Zurich story, actually the one that is closest to where I live is in an old Anglican or Methodist church, I think, on the street next to me, and it's quite an amazing space to have. The old church architecture and is used for library. And there's actually at least 3 libraries in Quebec City that are in former church spaces. Quite interesting. But I haven't yet gone and taken photographs there because it's COVID. Everything looks different now, right? Like there's tape. You cannot go to everywhere. People wear masks. There are plexiglass shields. So it doesn't look the best, I guess. And also, I don't want to stress out the library staff with having to deal with me on top of everything else they have to deal with. So I set my project aside for this year at least.
Very well. Coming back to the Toronto image that is at the Goethe Institut, what would be your favorite libraries there, since you've been in the city for at least 8 years, if I understood correctly?
Yeah.
So what libraries would you recommend for people who would be interested in lines and architecture to go visit?
It depends on what type of architecture you're into. So if you're into brutalist architecture, which I happen to like, I wouldn't miss the Robarts Library, which is the main library of the University of Toronto, which is quite imposing. It's a big, hulking building, but the interior spaces are quite well thought of. It's quite interesting. Architecture-wise, and if you're not that much into our Brutalist architectures, at least go and have a visit there, because there's also a rare book library in one of the wings of Robarts Library called the Fisher Library, which is open to the public. And this space is a bit different. So this one it looks more like maybe what a library would expect. So yeah, Robarts. Otherwise, I quite like the reference library. So this is the main library of the Toronto Public Library at Yonge and Bloor. I really love the space. And well, I could also mention the branch at it's Bloor and Gladstone. I think it's on Bloor Street, Gladstone. This one is an older building. I think it's a Carnegie library. And then there's an extension. There's a later extension, a modern extension, kind of a glass cube to the side. So it's quite a contrast between the old building and that extension. So especially at night, it's quite a sight.
Well, thank you very much. This concludes our podcast. I thank you very much for all your answers. If people want to follow you, they can follow you on your Instagram. If you want to give us your address on Instagram, and I believe you also have an internet site.
Yes, so my website is my name, thomasguignard.info, and my Instagram is Concrete Libraries. So we were talking about Brutalist libraries before. This is why it's called Concrete Libraries, but be assured that there's not only Concrete Libraries in this account.
So people can join you there, but they can also join you in November on Tuesdays on the Instagram of the Goethe Institut in Toronto. And you are exhibiting there until November 26, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.